Welcome to another episode of Performance Talking. Today we have a special guest. All right, we have Blake Upton and of Upton Racing, and we're going to be talking today about experiences. Blake's experience with life, his experience on how he got into motorsports, and what he is doing now. How you doing, Blake?
I'm good, man. How are you?
I'm doing great, man. So I like to always start this off with, how did you even get into motorsports? What brought you to motorsports? Like, everybody doesn't start off with a football in their hand or a steering wheel in their hand. Where and how did you get attracted and indoctrinated into motorsports?
I say it's like a long time ago, but it's really not. I started driving. I'm only 22. I turned 22 last week. So I'm still young.
Oh, happy birthday.
Thank you. I appreciate it. I celebrated in Mexico, so it was a good spot.
I bet.
But yeah, so when I started racing, I was really only like 14 doing go-karts on the West Coast. So, when you look at that compared to people I race against and they're karting since they're 5 years old, things like that, you're at a bit of a disadvantage, but it doesn't really matter when you get into cars because karting and cars are so different. As long as you have enough time in that car, you can build that skill base on top of really nothing. So you just have to have the right people behind you and everything like that. But I just did like events here on the West Coast, nothing crazy. And then I started driving cars when I was 15. Started in GT cars, doing stuff like Ferrari Challenge and Lamborghini Super Trofeo, things like that. Just testing.
Ooh, solid.
Yeah, nothing racing. The Lambo is cool, man. It's a good car. But then I got my start in single-seaters driving Formula 1600s in 2017, and then signed on with a team called Global Racing Group at the end of 2017 to get into their winter testing program. And we did about, I don't even know, probably like 20 days in the car, which is quite a bit.
Okay.
It's substantial, prior to the 2018 Formula 4 US Championship. But yeah, and then since then, it's just been a constant road. Did F4 in 2018, finished, I think the highest finish was 13th. Wasn't very good, if I'm being honest. I was learning as much as everybody else was. And the guys I race against are now all IndyCar drivers. So things like that. They just kept going, and I unfortunately had to stop momentarily, but hopefully again next year.
Okay.
But yeah, it's like F4 in 2018, and then learned what I needed to learn there. 2019 moved up to Formula 3, again with the same team, Global Racing Group. We were one of the best teams in the Paddock, if not the best. So I was really, really fortunate to be a part of their program. And then in 2020, did F3 again with like a proper run at the championship. That was tough because it was during COVID. So that introduced a whole new level of challenges that nobody had ever thought about.
Anticipated, right?
Yeah, exactly. So, and then since then, it's just been testing on and off. When COVID hit, I lost all my sponsorship, unfortunately. Everybody that was supporting me, marketing expenses are the first to go. And as a result of that, like my ride was just over like that halfway through the season. So that's unfortunate, but we've been working since then to get back on the circuit, and it's going pretty well. So hopefully we'll be back next year.
Okay, so it's not done for you. Okay, so you're looking to return. So I guess before I ask you the question I was going to ask you, with you saying that, it's kind of pretty much something that I've been talking about. So like Daniel Ricciardo, right? He's considering he's going to end up leaving 2023 and then say he's going to come back. So you've kind of actually set out for a time and then going back. How do you feel that will affect you once you return?
It's hard to say. Seat time is definitely the most paramount thing in motorsport. When you are out of the seat for a long time, whether it's a month or a year, you're going to feel the effects against the guys that have been in driving while you haven't. It's just a fact. Okay. When you look at anything, right? Like I draw a lot of similarities between racing to a lot of other sports. When you look at a sport like skiing, for example, say you only ski once a year and like you're a seasonal skier, everything, that first day back on the mountain, you're not going to be good. Like you're going to be terrible. by like a global standard, right? By a competition standard. But if
All
you're
right.
training to be a skier and then when ski season hits, you're skiing every day in that season, you're going to be
Okay.
miles better than everybody else on the mountain. So it works the same with driving. The more you drive, the better you get. Um, that being said, I'm in the best shape I've ever been. So sitting out
All right.
has benefited me actually quite a bit to become essentially like the next level of athlete when I get back in the car.
Okay.
But the skills are going to be a little rusty, to say the least.
Are you doing any type of sim racing to also exercise those? Because you sound like physically you're keeping your body up in tip top shape or the highest shape you can. But what about racing, steering wheel, seat time? Are you doing sim racing? What are you doing to kind of keep that from being subpar as much as possible?
Yeah, I do a lot of sim racing. I haven't been doing so much recently because my sim is being a little bit temperamental right now. My pedal box is having some issues. But
Okay.
I do a lot of go-karting. Go-karting's super, super fun. That's a really good way to like keep all your like neck muscles, all the forearms, wrists, everything like tip top because it's
Right.
really, really physical go-karting. And it teaches you really good racecraft as well. If you're out there just pounding around with like a bunch of good guys testing, it's
Right.
really good. And then obviously like local events, go-karting, it's a good way to keep the mind sharp, keep the muscles going, everything like that. Yeah.
Okay. You got your own card, or you use a card when you go there?
I have my own cart. Yeah, it's
What kind of card do you have?
I have an X30. It's an Ital cart. So we work out of a place called SEMA up in
Okay.
Sumas, Washington, and then I just do like local event testing stuff up there. Go up, wrench on it. My buddies and I all go up, and like 5, 6 of us go up and go pound around for the day. It's super fun.
Right. So okay, now let's jump into this because you did say something that I've definitely don't hear as common. You started karting at 14, correct?
Yeah.
Okay, now I've heard people say, like, even in Formula One, other people, Formula Two, other drivers say that, and I didn't agree with it when I heard it. So it's good to hear you say different to what I kind of coincide with is that if you haven't started karting by like 6, they're like, it's over for you. Like you're too late.
Yeah.
So what do you illicitly think about that dynamic? People saying like, if you haven't started karting by 6, it's too late. Because evidently you started karting at 14 and you still made it through some ranks of the level. So how do you feel about that narrative?
Um, I think that when you kart at such a young age, it teaches you the necessary skills when you're developing, right? When you're not when you're developing as a driver, but when you're developing as a human being. So just like social skills and everything like that, physical attributes are ingrained in you as you grow up. Racing tech or dynamics and racecraft and engineering and everything is ingrained in you as you go up. So having that knowledge base and skill set from such a young age is super valuable. But like I said, when you get into cars, it's very, very different. So it's good to have at least a little bit of a foundation before you just jump into a car to understand how a tire works, how suspension works, all that stuff, how like just the basics of driving and racing and everything. So when you jump in, you're not completely green, right? Um, as far as getting into Formula One goes, to be brutally honest, it's really just based on finances, which is something that isn't really talked about. Um,
Right.
and some of the best drivers ever have never been discovered because they didn't have the money to keep going. And that is a phenomenon that only exists in racing, where you have to have both the talent and the money. And you can't polish that talent without money. So when you're go-karting at a super young age,
Right.
unless you have a lot of money behind you, I mean, it costs like $200,000 a year to do a go-karting championship, to have a run at a title, right? So if you're doing that from the age of 5 all the way till the age of 17, when you jump in a car, any budget that anybody else has is going to be used up in like that first year of Formula 3 when you've used it up the entire time of your childhood. So it's kind of a balance where like if you don't have that money behind you, you have to be very, very smart with how you use it.
Right.
Where you see guys like Lance Stroll and a bunch of pay drivers, Nicholas Latifi, just using a
Latifi.
couple examples, yeah, where it's just like
Right.
you can essentially buy your way into Formula One. Now, they are very good drivers, but they had to have the money to get to that level of skill in the first place. So
Right.
it's a give and take, and it's a very fragile balance.
Now, I want you all to pay attention to something. Blake, you said around, we could just go ahead and say around 250,000, even in karting, like push you up right now. We were here with Troy Adams. He has the karting, kart racing out there, and also the whole motorsport outfit in the track. And he even said himself that he has parents that spend almost 70,000 a quarter. So that really lines up with the numbers that you just gave to us, because that's pretty much what we've been told, and so it must be accurate. So that's crazy to think about. But something else you said to me that is very paramount is something else I've also said. Some of the greatest drivers in the world yet probably have never been like experienced, never been found, and probably never will due to the money. So why is it that you think, your opinion, because you can't speak to like who's running the organizations and what they're trying to do, why is it that you believe that there are maybe, or if there are, you can let me know, programs to really find these talented drivers and say, hey, you know what? They may not have the money, but really at the end of the day, it's good for the sport. And maybe it will bring the money if we can get them on track. Why is there no program to kind of bridge that gap a bit to help those with probably like extreme amounts of talent make it to the grid?
Yeah, it's tough because it's a business, just like everything else. So when you have to put your business cap on and you really think about it, and you say, right, the people that own the team have to support a family. The people that are engineering your car and working with you, your two mechanics, two engineers per car, and your team owner just for a one car team, plus the truck driver, everything. That's a lot of expenses that need to go out the door, and somebody has to pay for them. So, I mean, you see it with the W Series, right? Like, that's
Yes,
something
man,
that I loved to see, where it's essentially a free ride for all the drivers that are in the series. But unfortunately, they had to curtail their season this year because of financial problems, and it's super disappointing to see because it was such a good program this year, and I really wanted to see the championship run out. But at the end of the day, it's a business, and if you can't show
right,
profits, then you're going to be bankrupt. And I mean, as far as a program to discover talent goes, you have to have somebody that really cares about that program, like Roger Penske, for example.
okay,
If he wanted to set up a program to find young drivers, he could do that and fund it himself and everything. But it's very diminishing returns because, say you have one driver that comes along, say like a Lewis Hamilton, right? Say you have
right,
a young Lewis Hamilton that comes along and he's miles better than everybody else, but you have another guy that's willing to pay outright for a Formula 3 seat, 100 grand more than the guy who is going to get it funded by somebody else. It's like
right,
you're going to take that extra money as a team owner, and that's the part that's super super challenging with it. Is like if you can bring more money than the next guy, you're going to get the seat within reason. Obviously, there's exceptions and nuances on top of that, but I really would like to see a program like essentially a driver search program to fund guys through the ranks, whether it be in NASCAR, through Formula cars, GT cars, anything. I think it would be really good for the sport, but it would be essentially like a passion project because
okay,
it would be very expensive, and there would have to be a heck of a marketing program behind it, and like everything like that, like you see in Formula One. That's the reason it's successful.
right.
Um, but it's tricky. Nobody's really figured it out yet, and I'm not going to be the one to come along and figure it out. I'm not smart enough.
Right.
I'm just the loose nut behind the wheel. But yeah, I think that would be a good thing for the sport.
All right. I can respect that. I can respect this. So, like, So the money is a really, really big thing. Like I knew it was a thing, but I didn't know that the money was so big that to that degree that you just explained, that it would literally keep them from choosing a better talent that could probably produce more historically great things. Matter of fact, speaking of great things, let me ask you this, because you said something about NASCAR, and I'm gonna get to something else you said, because you're saying a lot of good things. What do you think? What is your take on this latest one, Marvel comic super duper slingshot Talladega move that recently happened in NASCAR? Like there are so many people saying like it took great skill, or so many people saying that it was genius. Like, what is your take on it as a driver? Because you've actually been through professional ranks. What is your take on that skill level? How to you outstanding was it, and was it really that exciting for you?
You're talking about Ross Chastain's move in Martinsville.
Right.
I think that was awesome. Um, you saw Kyle Larson's interview after the race, and he was like, "I don't know why you guys are celebrating this. It's a disgrace to the sport that all this could happen." When I saw that on TV, I was like, "That is one of the coolest things I've ever seen." It was like last spot for the playoffs. You're gonna total the car. It doesn't matter. I mean, you saw his interview where he said, "I literally just kept it to the floor and let go of the wheel." I was like,
Right.
that was like one of the coolest things I've ever seen. And as far as like racecraft goes, like it wasn't illegal. Um,
Right.
he crashed his car, and it's like he's gonna have to drive a new car for the playoffs. But that bonus that he got was like more than enough to cover the costs. So it was just like it was like a total hero zero moment, and it obviously paid off for him. It was like probably one of the coolest things I've ever seen in motorsport.
So technically, explain to us what really gave him an advantage by doing that, because some may think like, well, he's rubbing the wall, so that's causing friction. He's actually slower, but actually he was going faster. So could you explain from a racer's point of view, like what is it that really gave him the plus to do that?
So he was obviously back in the order. I haven't watched the race. I was working. I was in Mexico.
Right.
But he was obviously back in the order. And in NASCAR, they use these things called safer barriers, where they're essentially one steel wall. It's essentially like an Armco barrier, except they have foam triangles in behind them to dissipate the force of an impact. So it's when you hit the wall, it stretches out the entire length of the fence. So that being said, they are three pieces of steel welded together, and it's all one piece all the way around the outside of the corner. So I'm assuming on his track walk, you're looking at everything. You're looking, okay, if I glance off the wall, what's going to be the damage? How hard is it going to be? All this stuff. If I go down, slide up and hit it, how hard is it going to be? So I'm assuming on the track walk, he looked and was like, oh, this wall's one piece. And he said he even did it in video games when he was younger. So when you're going around like that on a one-piece wall, yeah, there's going to be a lot of friction, but you're going into the corner at like 160 miles an hour or something like that. And
Right.
It's not going to be enough friction to take off that speed. So when you essentially like wall ride like that, it was enough of a radius, a wide enough radius, and a smooth enough surface where you could keep that minimum speed so much higher around the outside of the corner by like wall riding essentially, and use that slingshot effect to get that last spot in the playoffs. It was like I said, it was one of the coolest things I've ever seen.
Right. Some you won't see in Formula One. Definitely
No,
never.
no, never.
Never. All right. By the way, y'all did hear Blake say Super Trofeo. That's a Lamborghini. I believe what they build like so many, like every month there's so many races. And you can't actually get one because if you all are not familiar, I did a review on one that I saw at a local show, Caffeine and Octane. This guy had a Super Trofeo, so it was a pretty good interview. And it is a cool car. Like if you can't get a Batmobile, getting an all black Super Trofeo with a carbon fiber and the way that thing was decked out is your next best. What did you like about the Super Trofeo and that racing series that you were in along with that?
It's just it's a really good car. Like naturally aspirated V10. It's essentially like you're strapped to a bull, which is something that I really like about race cars. Is like it takes a special sort of finesse to drive them. Especially the more raw they get, the easier you have to be, and so. That car is it's like a super stiff chassis. You have a lot of weight in the rear. Really good suspension in the front, good steering rack, and it's just the way you drive it. It drives like no other GT car I've ever driven. Where when I drove the Trofeo, the team owner said, if you can drive this car fast and you jump in the Huracan GT3, like you're going to be rapping, because it's just like it's moving around underneath you. You turn into the corner, and it's the whole time it's like, squirming about in the rear, and it's just raw. Like I love it. It's like, as far as customer racing goes, it's one of the best cars ever. Like the 992 Cup car from Porsche is amazing. It's a great car. I know a lot of guys who race in that series. The Ferrari Challenge, great car. They definitely know their clientele for the car that they have built for them. But the Trofeo is like another level turned up. It's just like raw, loud, drop the clutch on the exit of the pit box and really just spin all the tires going into the pit lane and everything. It's just it's unbelievable. But yeah, you're right. The Batmobile is it's a close comparison.
Yeah, man, I love it, man. I do. I don't like to say don't love anything that can't love you back, but I really do like that Super Trofeo. Like, it is an awesome looking ride, especially when you see him in person. It's literally the closest thing you're gonna get to me having a raw race car on the street. This guy literally drives it on the street of Atlanta. It was really cool. So let's talk about this. You said some people are co-racers that you've actually been with have went into IndyCar. And are they currently driving now?
Yeah, most of them are. So like one of my best friends, Benjamin Peterson's driving for AJ Foyt next year in IndyCar.
Okay.
I raced against Kyle Kirkwood, Daniel Frost, David Malukas, all those guys. So they're all on the track to be in IndyCar if they're not already there. And it's really good to see those guys in the sport. I mean, you see it in just a little tangent. You see it in Formula One, right? Like George Russell, Charles Leclerc, Verstappen, Alex Albon, all those guys raced against each other their entire way up to Formula One.
Right.
And when you're racing with guys that are just so good, everybody's pushing each other to be better. And when you're racing each other like the top five the entire time you're in junior formula and karts and everything, when you get to that level where everybody hasn't been racing against you, all five of you are going to be way better than everybody else because you've just been pushing each other the entire way. So I'm very fortunate to have raced against all these guys when I was growing up because, I'm a better driver because of it, because we're always pushing each other for that last pass. It's good.
So is that where you really have your sights? Is it IndyCar? You still have your sights on somewhere? Because if for those that don't know, Blake literally does work with the Formula One series, like on another level, and you can explain that to him in part with this question. Is that still your sight, or is IndyCar now more of your goal? And if so, why?
My dream's definitely to be an IndyCar driver. I would always say when I was younger, my dream is to be paid to drive. Whatever that looks like, that's my goal. Whether it's being a factory driver in IMSA or, being an IndyCar driver, winning championships, whatever. Obviously, you want to drive at the top level. Whatever that looks like to you, that's the goal. So, IndyCar is my goal for sure. I would love to be a race winner in IndyCar, potentially a championship, depending on, the team you're with, everything like that. And I don't think it's too far-fetched, which is something that I'm very fortunate to say. I'm working on doing Indy Lights next year, having done time in the Road to Indy prior to next year. I think it's a very attainable goal. Like I said, we're still working on the partnerships for next year, and that's going really well for us, so we're very fortunate to have that. And, hopefully we'll be on the Indy Lights grid next year, and then maybe on the IndyCar grid a couple years later.
Don't forget about the small people. Don't forget about Wolfpack when you get there. I want to know. I would like to know and share your experience, like if you get that, because I think that's, to ride with those guys and race against those guys is different than making it to a series yourself and actually participating in it. And is the money game still very big in there as well as in Formula One when you're still talking about IndyCar? Is that still a very big factor on whether or not you can get a seat?
It's not as big of a factor. You do have to bring money depending on, like, for IndyCar, you have to bring money, unfortunately.
Okay.
Unless you are like literally God's gift of driver. Like you see it with Lewis Hamilton, right? Perfect example. Ron Dennis signed him when he was 7. So McLaren Automotive, McLaren F1 was paying Lewis his racing bills all the way up until Formula One, barring, a championship. Or barring championship loss. So he had to continue to win and push himself the entire way up to keep going. And we see that with the scholarship system in the Road to Indy. Like, it's really good, the scholarship there, depending on the entry fees and everything. So, I mean, if you have like 18 cars on the grid in Indy Pro 2000, you're looking at like an $800,000 scholarship at the end of the year for the champion. So, like, that's enough to kickstart you into the next level, into Indy Lights, and fund, 3/4 of your season. And if you can go find the rest, then you're off and going. So with that funding model, it's really quite good, but it's difficult, man.
Blake, like, how much, if you could give us a figure so people can put that in context, how much is this money to like fund a season? Let's just go with a season, and then people can multiply that to see what it would take to like try to have a career. How much money, more money, are you having to go find or having to have to even get somebody to give you your opportunity?
Yeah, so I'm not sure on the specific numbers
Okay,
now.
that's fine.
But if you had to say you won a scholarship worth $800,000 and you wanted to move on to the next level of Indy Lights, you would need to find probably another $400,000 in sponsorship.
Okay.
And something about this sport makes you so numb to numbers, where you say, for real, like when you say, okay, a day in an Indy Lights car is, $20,000. So you're looking at travel plus everything plus 2 days in the car. It's like $60,000 for 2 days. And then you look at the next level down and you think like, okay, a Formula 4 test is $5,000. You're looking at like $15,000 for a 2-day test. And you're like, that's actually not that bad, but it's still $15,000 for 2 days in a car.
Right.
So when you're playing with numbers that are like that extreme, it makes you numb to it. And it's something that you have to keep in mind when you're, trying to build a program, that like these are real figures and people work really, really hard to make this money. And, when you're building a marketing program around motorsport, you're also working extremely hard to make that work and show return on investment and everything like that, which we've been fortunate to show in the past and hopefully next year. But it's a business at the end of the day. But if you could take, answering your question, if you could take go-karts all the way up to IndyCar, doing 1, maybe 2 years at each level, when you get into cars, you're probably looking somewhere around $30 million.
I'm glad I swallowed that water before you said that. I'm glad I swallowed that water before you said that. $30 million? Yo, put that into perspective, people. $30 million from that right there, from that road of travel to that, right? Damn, Blake, that's crazy, bro.
It's
that is
substantial.
crazy. Man, so let me ask you about something else that's also been going around. Not everybody, let me not say that. A lot of people that pay attention to Formula One in the sport should be well aware. If you're not, then we'll make you aware, Blake, and I will bring you on in and tell you. There's been sort of an entry thing into Formula One that's been heightened with Andretti trying to get entered, and then Porsche still having talks. Okay, now you mentioned there are like literally 18 cars on the IndyCar grid or more?
On the Lights grid, there's about 30 on the IndyCar grid, which is good.
Okay.
Yeah.
30. So how do you feel about there being, my sweet number for Formula One is 12. How do you feel about more cars or more teams being added to Formula One? And then also, in part with that question, would you prefer to see that be teams like Audi taking over the Sauber chassis, or would you prefer to see maybe Porsche or another team like Andretti come in completely as a new team and pay the dilution fee? How many more cars on the grid, and how would you like to see these teams actually appear on the grid is my question.
I don't really, I mean, as far as how they appear on the grid, whatever that contract looks like, I don't think it really matters.
Okay.
I think more cars on the grid is always a good thing because it stretches out the performance bell curve. So if you pay the dilution fee now, everybody else makes less money or from the championship and everything like that, which is why there's big pushback to have no more than 20 cars on the grid because all
Okay.
these companies and teams have set up their entire funding model on 20 cars on the grid. So if Andretti comes in, you're going to have to pay that difference to every single team on the grid to have another 2 cars, plus the operation of running a Formula One team costs wise. Um, like I said, in IndyCar, 30 cars on the grid, it makes for great racing. Like there's battles going on everywhere, like you see in Cup Series, right? 30 cars on the grid in NASCAR. There's always something going on everywhere, and I think that's
Right.
really really good for the sport, especially as we enter this like very very heavily, very very heavy digital marketing era, where you know you can't necessarily be winning every single race because I mean, if that were the case, then nobody would be on the grid except the champion. So, like,
Right.
it's a slippery slope. So, I think the more cars, the better. And again, like we were talking about earlier with the driver search program, if you have more cars on the grid, you're going to need more drivers. And that just opens up doors to everybody else. So, I mean, I think it's a good thing for the sport. But the people with the checkbooks aren't too happy about it, having to pay like dilution fee and having to restructure everything as a result. So.
So do you think that's like a shortcoming? Because sometimes my take on it is, yeah, like let's say they got to pay that fee. Roughly in Formula One, Blake can correct me if I'm wrong because he's literally working with Formula One now. It's like it would come up to be about what, like $20 million per team because they had 10 teams now. You pay that fee to come in, it'd be around $20 million per team that they would get. And although they are saying like they're gonna get less, essentially a team being there brings in more fans depending on what's going on. So my ideal is like if the pie gets bigger but your percentage is the same, you still get more money because there's a bigger pie at that percent. So like let's say if your pot was 100 million and your portion of that was like 10% 20% or whatever the case was, if it goes to 200 million and you're getting more at that 20. So what is your take on it? Because you literally are closer to the epicenter than I ever will be as far as a driver. So
I think it's a tough call, especially for the team owners. So if you think like, okay, it's not a big deal that another team comes on if they pay the dilution fee, but you have to think of it also from a competition standard, not just on the track. If some team comes along and hires, say Andretti comes along and hires Daniel Ricciardo, now you're bringing that entire fan base of DR over to Andretti, and now Andretti is selling more merchandise. They're selling more tickets. They're selling everything. And that takes market share away from Mercedes and away from McLaren and Red Bull and all that stuff. So I think the numbers are a lot more impactful than just paying the dilution fee and calling it good.
okay.
But that being said, I think it's a good thing for the sport if more cars come along.
Okay.
Like in previous years, you've seen more than 20 cars on the grid in Formula One. And I think
Right.
that's been a good thing. Like I said, even if you're not fighting for the championship, you're going to be fighting for 15th, and like say that battle is 6 laps long. That's 6 laps that you have on TV that you're, giving to your sponsors and media content and everything that you didn't have before.
Right.
So yeah, I don't know. I think it would be good, but you're going to have to take it up with Toto and Christian and all them.
You got to take it up with the club first, right?
Yeah, for sure.
Man, so your experience, F4, F3, recruited by F1 to do the Paddock hosting, correct?
Yeah.
All right. How did that happen? How did F1 end up recruiting you for that? And then how do you enjoy that as far as, because you're traveling with the F1 circuit? So explain to the people how that happened.
So when I was racing Formula 3 in 2019, we were not racing at Circuit of the Americas. So for the US Grand Prix weekend, Formula 4 was there. Formula 3 was not there. We had actually finished our season already. So that was unfortunate. I was really hoping to be racing in the crowd with them. But that being said, it still helped me out in ways that I didn't comprehend at the time. So I was going around the circuit doing media and everything I do now, essentially for Formula One, doing interviews, talking to drivers on stage, all this stuff for as an ambassador for Formula 3 and just putting on a show around all the clubs in the paddock. And
Okay.
I actually interviewed with my now boss in 2019 on a truck tour. So it's a big like 18 wheeler. You go out around the circuit and you talk about, you know, what it's like to be a driver, track dynamics, vehicle dynamics. When you're racing, what does that look like? How do you think the racing's going to go? So I was doing a guest appearance with my boss now on the truck, and then like, you know, a couple months later he called me up and he was like, "Hey, do you want to come along and work for us?" And I was like, "Yeah." So here I am traveling and working for the Paddock Club, and I adore it. I mean, I didn't know if I would be any good at it when I took the job, but
Right.
I absolutely
You are
love it.
good, by the way.
Right?
Yeah,
Yeah,
you are
appreciate
good.
it. I like it's as good as driving. I love talking to people, and it satisfies my ADHD just like driving does, where you can focus on so
Mm,
many things at once. But when I'm racing, it brings it all to a point, and it's just like you're
okay.
here in this moment, and nothing else matters. And that is like a mindset that I've never been able to replicate anywhere else except for my current job in the Paddock Club and when I'm in the car.
Nice.
So it's a good time. I absolutely love it. And, you know, traveling the world and seeing all these places, Japan, Abu Dhabi, Mexico, all these places around the
Hey,
world. It's super, super fun.
damn, man, that is cool. But when you get ready to start racing, that's a wrap for that
Yeah, at least for the time being. Yeah.
time being. So I tell you what, let's talk about Upton Racing. All right. How important is it for you to actually have that brand? What is it like as far as finance and marketing, working with other people to come into the brand, and then also people that are trying to get into the sport that probably have no knowledge of, like, at this point in time, let's say you're like 20 years old and you're trying to get into the sport. What kind of advice would you have for that person? So first, Upton Racing, how are the finance and business side of that, not as specifically your finances, but just your experience with working with that, and then advice for somebody who would try to get into it like hella late bloomer.
Yeah, so my brand is actually something that I don't spend enough time on, unfortunately. I've just been
Okay.
going, doing other stuff. But it's a really good thing to have because it's a representation of me. It's an extension of myself. So when I bring people onto that brand as an extension of myself, you essentially have to act in a certain way. So like when you recommend people to work in the Paddock Club, for example, that's an extension of myself and everything like that. So it's a good way to kind of judge one's character
Okay.
as if like I'm, you know, all wise, I know everything kind of vibe, which I'm not at all. Um, but it's I don't spend enough time on it, admittedly, but it's a good thing to have. Just having a business license and learning to operate within, you know, tax code and everything like that. It's good. It's
Right.
a learning opportunity that a lot of young drivers don't get, and that's something that I also want to touch on. Where I was never media trained by a company. I was never anything like that. When you're racing and you're 15 years old, you know get on the podium, you do a TV interview, and like you're just thrown into it, and you have to figure it out. So
Got you.
that's something that's super difficult for drivers to learn at a young age. Where it's like when you're 16 and you're on TV, it's like you can't mess up. You gotta make it entertaining. You have to, you know, say the right things, thank the sponsors, thank everybody, and I think that's something that's super valuable to have set up in your life where you can kind of fall
Right.
back on that later in life, right? What was the next question?
The next question would be, what kind of advice would you give somebody who's like a late bloomer if they were talking about trying to get into racing? Let's say at the age of 20. because people say 6 a little too late, but evidently you proved that wrong because you've made it through the ranks. Somebody that's 20, we can fairly say that even at 20 years old, some people are still trying to find themselves in life,
Yeah.
even much later after that. But what kind of advice would you give them realistically if somebody came to you and said, Blake, listen, 20, I want to try to get into racing. What should I be doing?
I'd say firstly, get in the gym. You need to make sure that you are in top shape for whatever you're doing. And then realistically, even if you're not driving, the gym is just a good place to be. You feel better. Your, cardiovascular health is always good. You just, you're just like optimized, always in a good mood. And that's something that I struggle with when I'm on the road because I'm always working out in hotel gyms. And like, I've just come from
that changes.
Yeah, exactly. It's super tricky. It's like, I've just come from my, daily ritual here, which is like on a rest day, it's like sauna, ice bath, back to back for 3 rounds. And so like I keep it at, I don't even know, 100 degrees Celsius. What's that? 212. And,
Okay.
when you jump into there after like 2 weeks on the road, I can only stay in there for like 13 minutes, like max.
Your tolerance.
Yeah, exactly. But like after a month of being home or, just like getting that back to back, then it's like 25, 30 minutes, things like that. So it's just get in the gym is my main thing. Make sure you're strong, make sure your neck's strong, good forearm strength, all that. And then just figure out what you can do, whether it's go-karting at a local circuit, rental karting, trying to reach out to guys coming up through the ranks and just being like, hey man, what do you think I should be doing? Leverage your network as much as possible. Even if that's one person, reach out to them and just, ask for advice. Like if I'm in your network and you reach out, I'll say, yeah, exactly what I just said. Go do rental kart races. Go do local club races if you have like a Mazda Miata, something like that. But just like get out there and just start doing it. Really finances is the only excuse. Like there's no excuse to not be on the track other than financials. So if that's a possibility, then go do it. Just look up where's the closest racetrack. Go to it. Start asking them what can I do. How do I get on the circuit? You guys have time attack events. What's the best car for that? Local karting, all this stuff. Just go for it. That's my best advice.
I like that. That is very true. And Blake mentioned a lot of things that some people probably don't think of. Like everybody's focused on what you see on TV is the top, but there are a lot of local races in some areas where I'd probably have to travel about an hour in any direction, or hour and a half to get to the biggest track, to an hour to get to my local karting track. In those races, like, hey, and I'm 15 minutes from the local kart shop. So if you think about it in that small area, there are a lot of things that you all could participate in that has to do with racing. And you got to understand, you got to start somewhere. Like Blake said, you just got to go do it. But if you're serious about it, you got to work on your body. Blake really mentioned something that's key that some people like to skip over. Like you really need to work on your body. That was a very good point, Blake. So out of all of your experiences, going all the way up and your experiences are not done, which one was the most fondest to you when you started? Was it the GT? Is it the F4? Is it the F3? Which is the most fondest to you, the most experienced racing series to you?
I think one of my best memories was realizing how imperfect I was as a driver when I jumped into a Formula 3 car for the first time. Because you're coming from low power, not a lot of aero, racing against guys that probably only do that series and then they're done. Then they're off doing something else.
Right.
But when I jumped into an F3 car for the first time, I was humbled, to say the least. Like, it's a fast car, high aero, a lot of power. It's a handful. And that's like one of my best memories was at the test track we were at in Arizona. Just getting in that the first time and going flat, like on the throttle and just like grabbing gears like a Formula 1 car down the straightaway. It felt like, in Fast and Furious, like Too Fast, Too Furious, where they hit the NOS button and everything goes like hyper speed and everything. That's what it felt like the first time I drove that car. And
damn.
it was literally like everything was happening so fast and things like that. And it was, I was humbled extremely humbled the first time I jumped in that car, and that's one of my best memories in racing, to say the
Damn.
least. Yeah,
And the whole everything just shoot, shoot, shoot,
yeah, it
shoot,
was
just gone.
insane.
Damn. Well, Blake, listen, man, I really do appreciate you coming to the platform, and I like to, like I tell my community, my viewers, I like to establish real relationships with real people. I think that's most important. We've had Emma Gilmore, Amber Ballclean, we've had a few people here, and I just think real relationships with real people are more important to me on my platform. So it's not all about the high ticket items to me, right? Some of the information that you mentioned really relates to people that are out here that may be thinking about doing things and don't even talk about it because they really don't feel like they have somebody to talk to about it. And maybe hearing something that you just said, to local tracks, to working out, to things that you deal with in your own regular life, but you still participate in racing, might inspire somebody. So people can also get in contact with you as far as like following you and supporting your content. Could you tell them some places they could come to like do that?
Yeah, you can follow me on Instagram. It's just my name. It's just Blake Upton, one word. You can follow me on Twitter. I'm not super active on there, but Instagram is probably my main platform. If you reach out to me on Instagram, ask me about how I get into motorsport, I'll see if I can give you some helpful feedback, and try and support you guys as best as I can. Like I said, it's the easiest way is to just do it. Like, if you want to get into it, go to your local kart track, start doing races there. That's where I learned how to drive. I grew up and I still live in Seattle. So anytime it rains at the racetrack, I'm just like, frothing to get out because I know I'm going to be quick. So that's something that is super valuable. And you're being from Atlanta, you're very familiar with rain. Right. So you said your biggest track was what? Road Atlanta?
Actually, the closest track would be at Atlanta Motor Speedway for me. And then after that, Road Atlanta is probably about an hour and something from here. And then we got the AMS track.
Nice.
So yeah, probably a few different tracks, man. So definitely and within reach, but not close enough to be worried about the noise. So I like that.
Yeah.
I like that.
I hate people that like move right next to a racetrack and then they complain, "Oh, there's cars going around all the time." It's like, what'd you expect?
Yeah. That's what you got. Yeah, I thought you wanted that.
Exactly.
Right?
Yeah.
Hey, Blake, man, I appreciate you. Everybody, go follow Blake, support Blake on his content. When he posts it, it's always valuable to at least pay attention to people that are working their way. Like, you got actors, right? Like Robert De Niro. Then you have working actors like Robert Perigio, and those people are more beneficial and informative to you because they're constantly having to work. So it would give you a better idea of maybe what you may have to do in order to make it to that level, all right? They're going to be a little bit more transparent for you. So, Blake, I appreciate you. This has been another episode of Performance Talk. You all know what I say. You see the shirt, just build it. And thanks for watching another episode of Wolfpack Performance. Don't forget to check out some of my other content on Formula One and motorsports topics. Like, share, subscribe, and we go live on the weekends. See you soon.